it's not at all an easy time if you are a fan of Serie A giants Juventus. Now, Juventus are, of course, a club that have plenty of history and, of course, are arguably one of the most successful sides in Italy, but recent times have not been kind to them, and by their own high standards, they seem to be alarmingly heading towards a slump. And this is something that is perhaps no more so evident than in the way their current Champions League campaign is going. Now, if you've been following, of course, you remember that in their group, they are paired alongside PSG, Benfica, and Maccabi Haifa. And despite that, Juventus are currently struggling to actually make any sort of an impact in their group, because as things stand, they are only set to make it to the Europa League, much like another traditional European giant in Barcelona. We've done a video on them too. You can check it out on the channel if you haven't already. But for Juventus, you can say that the status is arguably far worse than it is for either of those other sides. How is that exactly the case? Well, let's check in. So far, there have been 4 match days, and that means that, of course, Juventus have played 4 matches wherein they've only won 1 match, but rather than get a draw and at least 1 or 2 of those games, they've ended up losing 3 of those matches. Now, the problem comes when you look at some of those results or where those drop points came from. Now, they did lose 1 match to PSG, which is, of course, somewhat understandable, considering PSG are, of course, a top side. However, losing to Benfica and then, of course, to Maccabi Haifa, who were expected to be the team who would be the wooden spoon holders in this particular group, they were expected to be the team that Juventus might get easy points against, but that wasn't really the case, at least not the first time around. However, what did happen thereafter is that right now, Juventus only have 3 points on the table. Now, because of that, they are level, incredibly, believe it or not, they're level on points with Maccabi Haifa. Both of them have 3 points each, but the problem is that they sit a total of 5 points behind both PSG and Benfica, who currently occupy the top slots, with PSG on top only on the basis of goal difference. Now, if you do the math, that means with 2 matches left, they need to make up a deficit of 5 points. So that basically means that if Juventus actually have to qualify, not only will they need an upturn in form of sorts, but they'll need a minor miracle in terms of results going their way. How so? Well, first off, they have to win both of their last 2 games. Without that, there is absolutely no chance of them actually qualifying for the next round, because it could very well be the case that a draw in certain circumstances will not be enough. They have to win both games, because again, if they get 1 draw, then that means that if the other team gets a win in that particular match day, then that's it. Their chances are done for. A draw or a loss will not suffice. They need to win both their games. But even beyond that, they need either one of PSG or Benfica to actually lose both of their games. Now, obviously, that's a major ask, especially considering that, look, okay, 1 match of, PSG and Benfica comes against each other. You could realistically say that, one or the other might take points off them. But both PSG and Benfica have a match against Maccabi Haifa. Now, again, you would expect that both of these teams who have been in form would be able to beat Maccabi Haifa. But let's assume that's not the case. Let's assume for 1 second that Maccabi Haifa actually win both of their remaining games along with Juventus. Then remember, it comes down to goal difference, because if Maccabi Haifa actually have a better goal difference, then they could potentially finish ahead of Juventus. So in more ways than one, Maccabi Haifa could be playing spoilsport, because remember, the fact that they beat Juventus means that Juve are in this position to begin with, and then if Maccabi Haifa can actually match Juventus's form but get a better goal difference, they could very well be pipping Juventus in that potentially 2nd place or even 3rd place if it really comes down to it. So for Juventus, there's a lot of moving parts that they need to actually go their way if they are to, of course, qualify for the Champions League. That doesn't mean that it's impossible. Of course not. Mathematically, they're still in with a chance, and stranger things have happened in the Champions League, whether it be in the knockout stages or in the group stages. But it's not going to be an easy task for Juventus, and indeed, one could say the fact that they're actually in this sort of a circumstance in this group, which was essentially seen as a 2-team group, because Benfica, with all due respect, don't quite compare to the might of both Juve and PSG. So it was expected that Benfica would struggle against those teams, but Benfica more than held their own, and Juventus are the ones who are struggling. But coming back to Juventus, this form that they're showing in this season of the Champions League is, or in fact are symptoms of a larger malaise that has actually gripped the club. Remember, Juventus have been actually struggling a lot in recent seasons, and the effects of it have only been starting to show now. You remember that at one point Juventus were on a run where they had actually won a number of league titles on the trot in Serie A. In fact, Allegri was himself in charge for about 5 of those titles which they won. And once he left the club, they actually ended up started going on a bit of a downward slope. Remember, it was Allegri who was in charge of Juventus when they in fact won when they reached the Champions League final of 2017, and they unfortunately ended up losing that final, and that was the last time they actually played there, despite the fact that that was supposed to be the appearance that would actually help them kick on and maybe end their drought in the Champions League, which has been ongoing for a while. But after that, what happened was a year later, they ended up signing Cristiano Ronaldo. That was, of course, in the summer of 2018. And then what happened was that the year after that, remember, they won the Serie A, but they didn't do much in the Champions League. And in 2019, Allegri was asked to walk 1 year ahead of his contract actually finishing. So he was basically told that, look, that's it. We want to be heading in a different direction. We want to be playing more attractive football, and we don't think that you are the man who will actually be taking us to Champions League glory. They brought in Maurizio Sarri, and Sarri did win, of course, the league title in 2019-20 season. But he got sacked. Then they brought in Andrea Pirlo for 1 season. He only ended up winning the Coppa Italia, and then also, he only managed to oversee a top 4 finish in Serie A. That in fact was the end, or the start of the end of Juventus's era of domination, because since then both of the leagues that have taken place have been won not by Juve but by, of course, their rivals. So again, 2020-21 it was won by Inter Milan under Antonio Conte, and the 2021-22 Serie A was won by AC Milan. Meanwhile, Juventus have been somewhat also-rans in the league, because again, other clubs have also been looking to actually step up their spending and maybe try and get into those lucrative Champions League spots. Remember, in Serie A right now things are fairly competitive, and in fact they're so competitive that Atalanta, who are in essence a small club in the city of Bergamo, currently sit atop Serie A. Where do the mighty Juventus sit? Well, they currently sit in 7th place, 8 points behind Atalanta, who again, I would remind you, are not only a small club in terms of the place that they occupy, but also in terms of the kind of budget that they have. They operate on the fraction of a budget that a club like Juventus do, and the fact that they are actually so far ahead of Juventus is in many ways not a great look for Juventus. So the simple fact of the matter is that once Allegri walked the first time around, all the way back in 2019, that was the start of the slump for Juventus. So Juventus realized that, look, things aren't really working out, so we are in fact going to bring back the man who led us to our greatest success in the recent times. It hasn't worked out that well for them right now either. So it is fair to say that they're in a slump, because again, on current form, they aren't even making it to the Champions League spots. In fact, they're a long way off. Let's put it this way. They have 1 match in hand in the league. But even if they win that, the best that they can get right now is 6th position. And that's with about a third of the league almost done. So it's not a good time to be a Juventus fan. And obviously, there are a lot of question marks about where it is that the team are heading. But an exit in the Champions League group stages in a group that many people thought they could easily qualify out of would in fact be the latest sign in the fact that yes, the grand old lady of Italy is on a bit of a decline, and that something needs to be done in order to stymie or stop that decline. What exactly is it that could be done? Well, that's something that we'll only be able to answer in due course. But as of now, they do need to stay the course. But more importantly, they need to find quick solutions to stop the rot, because right now they're not playing great football. They're winning matches on very tight score lines. And so there's a lot of pressure, not just on the players, but also on Massimiliano Allegri. Whether or not they can turn things around in time or in a way that would help them make the Champions League knockouts, something we'll only know in due course. But enough about how I feel about this. What do you guys think? Do Juventus actually stand a chance, given that mathematically too it seems very unlikely? Do you think they'll get knocked out? What do you think Juve need to do to actually get back to the glory days? Do let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap the bell icon. Then you can go and follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and last but not least, download the AajTak app as well. Thank you all once again for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Reyes. I hope to see you all through the day, but for now, goodbye.